Namaskar friends, welcome to the channel JIV and CIV Made Simple. In this particular video, we are going to discuss our MSME 28 February 2026 memory based question and answer along with detailed explanation. So it will help you to get what are the important topics from where question are repeatedly asked. If you have not seen our previous memory based question video, you can check out the link in the description section. So let's get started with our very first question, which is based on partnership firm. So the question is asking the reconstitution of partnership firm necessitate the drafting of new partnership deed to reflect structural change. In which of the following scenario is a firm legally reconstituted, yet the existing deed may not strictly require a complete overhaul or replacement to maintain the firm continuity? Option they have provided: when a partner is expelled for misconduct under the provision of the deed. Option B, when a minor previously admitted to the benefit of the firm elect to become a partner. Option C, when the profit sharing ratio changes among existing partners. And option D, when a partner dies and deed remains silent on the continuation of the firm. This is a very good question. What it is asking, that when does a partnership firm get reconstituted, but we may not need to replace the partnership deed to continue for misconduct under the provision of the deed. So what do you think about option A? See, expulsion changes. So basically, partner expelled for the misconduct. See, what is the main thing is that expulsion changes the constitution of the partner. So the key point is, let me write it down. Any kind of expulsion, obviously it changes the constitution of the partner. Yes, constitution changes. So what happened? Right, duties and sharing changes. Obviously, right, since constitution changes, so it will have impact on right, it will have impact on duties, it will have impact on sharing. So obviously fresh agreement is required for that. So it is not the correct answer. It is not the correct answer. What about option B? If you look at the option number B, it says that when a minor previously admitted to the benefit of the firm elect to become a partner upon reaching age 18. Yes, correct. B is the correct one. What about C? When the profit sharing ratio changes among existing partner without any admission or retirement. So if you look at the option C, so it is basically talking about, change in the profit sharing ratio. This is the key point. So please understand that this profit sharing ratio is the core of partnership firm. Right, let me write it down. So there is something that we call, profit sharing ratio. So this is the core of partnership, right? So even if partner remain the same, agreement changes. Agreement changes even if partner remain the same. So it require new or revised deed. So obviously option number C is not correct. Right, option number C is not correct. So obviously it require a new deed. Previously it cannot be worked like that. What about option D? When a partner dies and the deed remains silent on the continuation of the firm. So if you look at the option number D, it says law say that law say regarding partnership firm that any kind of death, it leads to dissolution. Death means dissolution if deed is silent. So to continue business, what happened? Old firm has to end, new firm has to start, right? And new deed is compulsory. So if you look at the option number D, this is not correct. So what we learned from this discussion is that minor already in, just upgrade, right? Minor already in, just upgrade. So what I mean to say that minor already admitted to the benefit, minor admitted to benefit, and turning 18, what happened? A status upgrade happened. Turning 18, a status upgrade happened. No outsider, no breakup, no fresh start. So when I say upgrade, it does not mean fresh start, right? So what we learned is that minor can be admitted only to the benefit, not full partnership. On attaining majority, 6 months he has to decide. If he want to continue, they become fully liable from the original admission date. Reconstitution does not always mean new deed. So remember, the key word is death plus silent deed. Death plus silent deed, it means dissolution. So I hope now it is clear that when we need to reconstitute, when we need to provide fresh deed, and when we need not provide fresh deed to the context of partnership firm. Now have a look at the question number 2. Question number 2 is on your screen. So basically what this question is all about, it is asking that following the devastation of the World War II, which nation implemented a highly centralized priority production system, shifting state resource toward coal and steel to trigger a miracle of export-led growth and high-tech industrialization? Italy, Germany, Japan, and USA. Very good question. So what this question is asking, So basically, this question is asking that after World War II, which country used a highly centralized government system to push money and resource into coal and steel first, and later into export and high-tech industry, creating an economic miracle? So the option have been given. So let me just take you through the concept that we have. So what happened after World War II? See, World War II completely destroyed the Japan economy. Yes, the Japan economy was completely destroyed. Factories were damaged. Fine. And resources were very scarce. Resources were scarce. Japan had to rebuild from zero. Yes, they have to rebuild from scratch. That's called zero. Right? Japan has to rebuild from zero. Now, what strategy did Japan follow? So Japan follows something called, developmental state model. Please remember it. We call it developmental state model. What happened here? Government did not leave growth to free market force. Government did not leave growth to free market force. Rather, what they did, that the government actively guided the economy. The government, they guided the economy. Right. So a special ministry was created that was called MITI. That is called, Ministry of, let me write down the full form. Sorry for my handwriting. Ministry of International Trade and Industry. This ministry was created. They played a key role. Now, you might have seen their word. They have mentioned that priority production system. What does it mean? See, Japan deliberately diverted resources toward basically what they did, they diverted the resources toward coal or steel. The question is why? Why do they divert? Because coal means energy. Coal means energy, and steel means infrastructure, machine, and ships and factories. That is the meaning of steel. So these are foundation industry. And once these foundation industry are strong, Japan moves into, see, these are the foundation industry, right? And once these industries are strong, Japan can easily move into shipbuilding. So they focus more on strengthening these fundamental, fundamental industry. So Japan go into shipbuilding, automobile, and electronic, right? So what was the result? The result was that this led to the Japanese economic miracle. Yes, it leads to economic miracle. That's called miracle. See how miracle happened. So Japan shifted from during the 1950 to 1973, Japan shifted from cheap irrigation goods to high quality high tech product. Right. So instead of cheap irrigation good, they have high quality high tech product. And introduce efficient system like JIT, just in time production. They become a global export powerhouse. So if you look at the option number C is the correct. See why I told you this entire story, so that you can appreciate what Japan has done, right? So option B is Germany. So Germany follows something called ordo liberalism. So they focus on social market economy, competition plus welfare. Government did not centrally pick industry like Japan. USA followed a market driven capitalist model. Government intervention were limited. No centralized priority production system. What about Italy? Italy is not the correct answer. See, so what we learn is that MITI, MITI, it made Japan, right? Industry policy, technology and trade, industry miracle. If you have seen priority production, coal steel focus, export led growth, answer will be Japan. So Japan followed a developmental state model. Government actively guided industry. MITI played a central role. The first focus was on coal and steel. Friends, before continuing to the next question, let me introduce you to our certificate course on MSME. So you can check out, if you want one complete solution for the entire MSME, you can check out our course. So in this course you will get unit wise theory and MCQ PDF as per the syllabus prescribed by IBF. So there is a separate folder I have created. I have divided the entire course in 6 modules, and inside each module content you get unit wise theory, unit wise MCQs PDF. Not only that, in addition to that, you get previous year question. There are 8 files I have uploaded. starting from February 2025 till now. And in addition to that, we provide you quick revision PDF module wise through which you can revise the entire content in very short time. So if you go through the entire content, this will help you revise it very shortly in a short span of time. So for more detail, you can check out the link in the description section, or you can WhatsApp 7 years from the date of its incorporation when the annual turnover of any previous financial year exceed 25 crore. Option C, it says that basically when the annual turnover for any previous year exceed 100 crore. And option D, option D says once the entity successfully lists its share on a recognized stock exchange, that is IPO. So first of all, let me explain how does the government define a startup? How does the government define a startup status? Fine. See, the government of India give a special benefit to a startup. Like, what kind of benefit it give? Like, tax exemption. Right. A special benefit which are provided to government to a startup, like, tax exemption. Then, easier compliance. Compliance is easy. And also, regulatory relaxation. Regulatory relaxation. Right. But these benefits are meant only till the company become enough. So what is the most important exit condition? Yes, there is a turnover limit. Please understand, there is a turnover limit. So as per the DPIIT gazetted notification, an entity will not be treated like a startup if annual turnover. An entity will be treated as a startup only if its annual turnover has not exceeded 100 crore. Right. So in the recent notification, there was a change. Let me explain. So a startup is recognized period up to 10 year. See, this is the change. Please note it down. Recognized period up to 10 year and turnover limit is 200 crore. Earlier it was 100 crore. Now it has been extended to 200 crore. Please note it down. Right. So this is the very important change that you must keep in the mind. Now let's come back to our discussion that we are discussing. So 200 crore, right? So annual turnover has not, if it exceed 200 crore, see, if it, this is the 200 crore is the benchmark. If it is more than 200 crore, not a startup, right? If it is below 200 crore, yes, this is a startup, right? And the moment turnover cross 200 crore, even once, a startup recognition automatically stop. So, and 10 years. So I think none of the option is correct. Actually, instead of 100, it will be 200. Option C is correct, right? What about a completion of 7 year? No, it is increased to 10 year. Actually, it is 10 year, not 7 year. Option B, turnover exceed 25 crore. No, that's wrong. That's wrong. 25 crore was the old limit. Now it has 200 crore. Now, once an entity successfully listed share on IPO, actually listing on a stock exchange does not automatically cancel a startup status. If age and turnover condition are met, a startup status may still continue. So D is also wrong, right? So option number C is the correct answer. Please understand. Now have a look at the next question. So please replace this 100 with 200. That's the correct answer. Now, following the Companies Amendment Act 2015, which of the following statement accurately describe the statutory requirement for a minimum paid up share capital of a private limited company in India? So basically, this question is asking, after the Companies Act 2015, what is the legal requirement regarding the minimum paid up share capital for a private limited company in India? Option number A says that it must be a minimum of 1 lakh as per the section 2 subsection 68 of the Companies Act. B says that there is no minimum limit prescribed by the law allowing incorporation with any amount of paid up capital. C says that minimum paid up capital must be at least 10% of the authorized capital mentioned in the MOA. And D says that minimum of 50,000 is required provided the company has at least 2 directors. Very good question it is. So basically, the question is asking, after the Companies Act 2015, what is the legal requirement regarding the minimum paid up share capital for a private limited company in India? So this question is asked every time. Private company, public company, OPC. So you must have command over all these topics, right? So let me explain in the detailed way. So basically, what was the position earlier? So before 2015, section 2 subsection 68 of the Companies Act 2013 require minimum paid up capital. Minimum paid up capital of how much? 1 lakh for a private company. Please understand, for a private company it require minimum paid up capital of 1 lakh. So earlier no 1 lakh. So earlier it was no 1 lakh. So not correct incorporate. Now what happened in the year 2015? Please understand, the Companies Act Amendment 2015 made a big change. Of 1 lakh rupees or such higher paid up capital were deleted. So means that the law removed the minimum paid up capital requirement. So there was no minimum paid up capital requirement. Earlier it was, but now it is not. So a private limited company can be incorporated with 1 rupee, 10 rupee or any amount. So if you look at the option, so option number B is incorrect, right? Absolutely correct. So now you may ask me, what is the difference between authorized capital and paid up capital? So let me explain. So basically, please understand, when I say authorized capital, that means, the maximum capital a company can issue. This is a maximum capital that a company can issue, and usually kept on 1 lakh. It is usually kept on 1 lakh during incorporation, right? Reason is this is the MCA fee slab. Fine. Now what about the paid up capital? I told you paid up capital is the actual money, bought by the shareholder. It is the actual money bought by the shareholder, right? So no minimum prescribed by law. That's paid up capital. So practical minimum, please understand, a private company must have at least 2 shareholders. So a private company must have at least 2 shareholders, and each must subscribe to 1 share each. 1 share per shareholder. Each must subscribe to 1 share. So practically, if face value is rupee 1, so paid up is rupees 2. If face value is rupees 10, paid up is rupees 20. Fine. So actual, what I mean to say, that at least 2 shareholder is required, right? At least 2 shareholder is required, and each must subscribe to at least 1 share. So if you look at the option they have provided, option E says that it must be minimum of 1 lakh. No, that was a pre-2015. It was pre-2015 requirement. Earlier it has been changed. Option number C, 10% of authorized capital. C, no such rule in the Companies Act. D says 50,000 with 2 director. No. Number of director has no connection with the paid up capital. So remember, the trick to remember is that 2015 zero capital rule, right? Please understand, zero capital rule. Before 2015 1 lakh was required. After 2015 no minimum. So what we learned from this discussion is that Companies Amendment 2015 removed the minimum capital. Section 2 subsection 68 amended. Paid up capital no minimum limit. Authorized capital is still decided for fee purpose, and practical minimum is the value of the subscribed share only. Now let's switch our focus on to the next question. The next question is on your screen. Very good question it is. So basically this question is asking that after the Companies Amendment Act, I think we have discussed it. Okay. So yes, this question is asking the transformation of Ludhiana. So basically, which international organization played the main role in transforming the Ludhiana nightwear cluster into a globally competitive, modern and smart industrial cluster? See, earlier it was called, Ludhiana nightwear cluster, and it has been diverse. It has been transformed into globally competitive is modern and smart industrial cluster, right? So this transformation has bowed down by which international organization? World Bank, UNIDO, IMF, WTO. So first of all, let me explain what is this Ludhiana knitwear cluster. Let me explain. See, LKC. So Ludhiana, Punjab is one of the India's biggest hub for knitwear, right? Or hosiery, or woolen garments. It mainly consists of SMEs. It mainly consists of a small and medium enterprise. So what problem did cluster face? Yes, these type of cluster, they face certain kind of problem. So before intervention, the cluster suffered from outdated technology, obsolete technology, then limited yarn variety. So they were having limited variety of yarn, low productivity was very abysmal, and lack of skilled labor. There were no skilled labor, and poor market was very poor, and export information. So individually a small unit could not solve this problem, obviously. So these were the problem, like outdated technology, limited variety, low productivity, skilled labor not there, market was very poor. Individually these small unit cannot solve this problem, so they cannot solve it. Fine. So what happened, in the year 1997, what happened, that UNIDO steps in, and they selected Ludhiana as the pilot cluster under the CDP. You know what is CDP? CDP is called, Cluster Development Program. cluster development program. So what did UNIDO actually do? See, UNIDO provided technical and developmental support, like basically technology upgradation guidance. Technology upgradation guidance. This UNIDO provided. Second thing they did was the yarn diversification support. Yarn diversification support also they provided. Third thing that they did is the skill development and training, skill development and training, market intelligence, promotion of collective efficiency. So UNIDO did not give loan but gave knowledge, system, global best practices. Please understand what UNIDO did. So remember, UNIDO never give loan. They did not give loan, but what they give knowledge. They give system. They give global best practices. What was the result? The result was that UNIDO was the Ludhiana become a globally competitive knitwear hub. Shift from low value product to better quality export oriented garment. So yes, the correct answer is UNIDO, right? What about World Bank? So see, World Bank is not the correct answer. Why? Because it focused mainly on infrastructure, poverty reduction, government level effort. IMF deal with the balance of payment. They deal with the macroeconomic stability. WTO, this is the global trade rule. Fine. So it does not provide cluster specific development. So while UNIDO led the development, Indian institutions supported financing, like SIDBI. SIDBI supported financing, SBI supported financing. They provide credit facility, schemes like Mutual Credit Guarantee Fund. Right, I hope it is clear. This is the United Nations body, UNIDO, Industrial Development Organization. United Nations Industrial Development Organization. So what we learned from this discussion is that Ludhiana Knitwear Cluster is a SME based industrial cluster. It selected in the year 1997, and program was the UNIDO Cluster Development Program, that's called CDP. Please note down the program name also. Sometimes this may be asked. And the focus was on technology, skill, yarn diversification, smart cluster. And yes, it transformed. What is the meaning of this word? See, balance sheet total, they have given 10 lakh. What does it mean? It simply means that, this basic equation, that total asset is equal to total liability. So when I say total asset or total liability, it includes capital also and, long-term liability, short-term liability, everything. Now we have to identify the external liability. What is the external liability? Think about it. See, we have to identify what is our external liability. To solve this question, we need to identify, just wait a minute. External liability. You know what is the meaning of external liability? Which means amount payable to the outsider. Amount payable to the outsider, that's called external liability. Now you look at it. So if you talk about this current liability, obviously it is a kind of outstanding external liability. If you look at this long-term debt, yes, it is a outside liability. So just add these two, current liability plus debt, right? So that becomes 5 lakh plus 2 lakh. That is equal to 7 lakh. You can check out now. Current liability 5 lakh, external debt is 2 lakh. So external liability is 7 lakh. Now, what we need to find, what the question is asking to find the net worth. And this equation we know, total asset is equal to total liability. Now we need to find equity before adjustment, right? See, first of all, we are talking about before adjustment. See, one thing I think you know it very well, that net worth plus total liability, external liability, right? And these two equal is the total asset. I think you are familiar with it. This is the very basic equation. And this is before adjustment. We have not done adjustment yet. What kind of adjustment? Just we will see. So on this basis, we can compute that net worth before adjustment is equal to total asset is how much? They have given total asset is I think 10 lakh. Yes, 10 lakh. So 10 lakh minus 7 lakh, which is 3 lakh. That is the net worth. So at first glance, owner fund appear to be 3 lakh. But they have given that on the asset side, there is a profit and loss debit balance of 1 lakh. This also they have mentioned. So that's called, we have to adjust for this PL and debit balance, which is the loss. Yes, on the asset side, we have to adjust for it. So before adjustment, this is the answer. Now we have to adjust. So basically, what they have given, that profit and loss debit balance, they have given 1 lakh. What does it mean? And this loss is a kind of fictitious asset. It reduces the real worth of the owner fund. So the real net worth is, right, the question is all about the real net worth, which is equal to 3 lakh minus 1 lakh, which is the fictitious asset, which is 2 lakh. So the final net worth is 2 lakh. Sometimes what happens? in hurry we tick this 3 lakh and we get the incorrect answer, and after coming out of the examination we think that we have marked correctly. So actually you have not marked correctly, your concept is wrong. So first of all, try to understand this profit and loss debit balance is a kind of fictitious asset. It lowered down the value of the net worth. So the correct answer is 2 lakh. So what we learned is that net worth. So one simple formula you can remember to solve such kind of question is that net worth is equal to total asset minus outsider liability minus loss, right? So balance sheet total means total asset means total liability. External liability includes current and long term liability. Net worth is the residual interest of the owner. PL and debit balance is accumulated loss. Loss is a fictitious asset, must be deducted. And net worth must always be tangible. It will never be intangible. Now have a look at the next question. The next question is on your screen. Very good question it is. So which central government scheme help micro and small enterprise reduce the cost burden of outdated machinery by giving an upfront capital subsidy for adopting proven modern technology? Very good question. So the key point is, let me highlight, mitigate the financial burden of technological obsolescence, right, in the MSE sector by providing upfront capital incentive. PMEGP, TREDS, CLCSS, TIFAC. So actually this question want you to understand all of this technology, all of these schemes basically. So we will cover one by one. So basically the key point here is I have highlighted already, that is the technological obsolescence. So when I say technology obsolescence, what does it mean? It means the machine become old. It means machine become obsolete, outdated or inefficient. And obviously since machine become old, so what will happen to the production cost? It will go up. And what will happen to the quality? It will go down. So this is a major problem for major MSE. Yes, all MSME faces this problem, right? As new machinery is expensive. So what the scheme solve it? Yes, the name of the scheme is CLCSS. What's the full form? Credit Linked Capital Subsidy Scheme. So this is the flagship technological upgradation. Please note it down. We have already discussed this point. This is the kind of technological upgradation scheme. So the government give a capital subsidy of 15%. Let me write it down. So what government does here, they give a capital subsidy of how much? Of 15%, right? This subsidy is given for what? This subsidy is given for replacing the old machine. Fine. Installing the modern and energy efficient high productive technology. It applied to 51 subsector. Yes, there are 51 subsector where it apply, which may be textile, which may be pharmaceutical, energy, engineering goods. So the subsidy is upfront, which directly reduces the cost burden, right? Subsidy is upfront, which directly reduces the cost burden. So if you look at the option, yes, option C is correct one. Yes, C is correct one. CLCSS. If you talk about option number A, that is PMEGP. So what PMEGP is all for? That is Prime Minister Employment Generation Program. So remember, it is meant for starting the new micro enterprise. If you want to start new micro enterprise, then we have PMEGP. Setting up new micro enterprise, generating employment. What about TREDS? I think you know it very well. This is a trade receivable discounting system. This is an online invoice discounting platform. It improved cash flow. What about TIFAC? TIFAC is wrong. It is an autonomous body under DST. It focuses on technological forecasting, technological assessment. So CLCSS means change the latest costly system with subsidy. Right? That's the point. That is all about CLCSS. Now, next question we have. So friends, when the question is, when the bank give pre-shipment or packing credit facility under the running account facility, let me highlight it. This is a very important point. Running account facility. Bank is providing the pre-shipment or packing credit under the running account facility without asking for export document upfront. So when I say running account facility, they don't without prior submission of the document. So what document must the exporter ultimately submit to justify the loan? So what happened? Under the RBI guideline, pre-shipment is sanctioned to exporter to finance the working capital requirement prior to shipment. You know it very well. So bank can also grant running account pre-shipment credit without prior submission of document with good track record. However, the exporter must produce the dash with a maximum period of 365 days. Right. Otherwise, to avoid the facility being treated as ineligible. So what they have to submit? So basically, first of all, let's understand what this pre-shipment or packing credit is all about. Either you call it pre-shipment or you call it packing credit. See, it is like a working capital loan. It is like a working capital loan given to the exporter. Fine. The purpose is to purchase the raw material. The purpose is to process and manufacture good. The purpose is to pack the good before shipment. The purpose is to pack the good before the shipment. And you know, it is granted before the export happen. Now you may ask me, what is this running account facility? Let me explain. That is called running account facility. So normally bank asks for, you know, LC. Normally bank asks for export order. So bank asks for letter of credit, export order before granting the packing credit. Before granting packing credit, bank asks for LC and export order. But for reputed exporter with good track record, bank may allow running account packing credit. So it means that what, you know, credit is given first. It means credit is given first and documents are submitted later. First of all, you give the credit and then document will be submitted. So this is the kind of, you know, relaxation. This is a kind of relaxation. This is not a waiver. So what is the compulsory requirement? That even under running account facility, the exporter must ultimately produce the letter of credit and confirmed or firm export order. Fine. So what I mean to say, that even under running account facility, the exporter must produce these two things. Either they have to produce this letter of credit or confirmed firm export order. Why? Because of the nexus rule. What is the nexus rule? RBI says that every packing credit must have a direct nexus with the real export transaction. So, you know, this nexus is legally established only for LC, only by LC and firm export order. And you know, there are time limit also there, 365 days maximum. Right. Packing credit must be adjusted by export document or converted into post shipment credit. What if LC or export order is not produced? So obviously if LC or export order is not produced, bank will do what, you know, bank will charge commercial rate of interest. Bank will charge commercial rate of interest, not concessional export credit line, if it is not produced, and withdraw the running account facility. They will withdraw it. Fine. So if you look at the option that they have provided, so option number A is correct. Yes, these two are required. B is not correct. Bill of lading is issued after the shipment using the post shipment finance. So the bill of lading is used in the post shipment finance. Bank guarantee. So bank guarantee provides security. It does not provide an export transaction. And so remember, packing credit require proof of packing, and LC is a good proof of packing. So either LC or firm order. No LC, no nexus, no export credit benefit. And running account means no document. Fine, please remember it. Now friends, the question is the SARSAI. It is asking, under which law does the SARSAI get the legal power to maintain a central database of security interest? Under which law? 4 options have been given. Very good question. So why was SARSAI needed? First of all, let's go through the history. Why do we need SARSAI? See, earlier there was a problem in the banking system. Like borrower could create equitable mortgage. Borrower could create equitable mortgage, deposit of the title deed, take loan from bank A, right? Take loan from bank A, then again mortgage the same property with bank B. The result was, you know, fraud. The result was, you know, NPA. So they could make equitable mortgage, take loan from bank A, again take loan from bank B. So no central record was there. Multiple loan on same property. Result is fraud and NPA. To stop this, a central registry was required. And you know, which law created this mechanism? The SARFAESI law created this mechanism. That is called, you know, SARFAESI Act 2002. So under chapter 4 of the SARFAESI Act, government was empowered to set up a central registry. So government was empowered to set up a central registry. So this registry record mortgage, charges, hypothecation. So this has to record the mortgage, charges, hypothecation, and you know, any kind of security interest. Fine. So this registry is called, you know, SARSAI, Central Registry of Securitization, Asset Reconstruction and Security Interest of India. So it maintains a publicly searchable database. It allows bank and FI to check whether a property is already charged or not. It applies to individual, firm and company. So if you look at the option number A is BRA. No, that's wrong. That will be the licensing of the bank. control and supervision of the banking business. Option number B is B says, Companies Act 2013. This is also wrong. Because it provide for the registration of charges only by company. The correct answer to this question is, SARFAESI Act. C number is correct. So S for SARFAESI, S for security interest. This way you can remember. S for what? S for SARFAESI. And S for what? S for